there now. Just 24 hours to go.
Yeah, but unfortunately, your prediction has come true.
Yeah, very sad. I should keep my mouth shut. We've lost Errol Brown of hot chocolate today.
And that makes 3.
It certainly does. I'm glad the election's tomorrow. Hopefully that's the end of it.
Yeah, so we should move on from that and hopefully it will all be finished before anything else happens. And
Yeah.
one of the things that hasn't changed in the course of the campaign is basically the polls, because the last one came out panel base recently, and it seems to be basically as you were. And it's been remarkable throughout the campaign that it almost hasn't changed. A couple of points here or there, but we're more or less as we were at the start of the campaign.
Yeah, quite remarkable. SNP half the votes, Labour a quarter, and everybody else sharing the rest. Quite stable, quite incredible. And let's see how that plays out. I think that Labour are talking about pockets of areas where they've got votes that they recognise they can get out, and I think they've been working to figure out what seats they can hang on to on that basis. But it'll be interesting to see exactly where those are tomorrow. It could be, we could end up with Labour holding on to a number of seats by not very much, or it could be that the SNP win those final Labour seats by not very much. Going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And I think across Scotland could be big variations between what happens in some of the Glasgow seats with big Labour majorities that they might have think they've got a chance in, and some of the other West of Scotland seats. Compare that to some of the Edinburgh seats that are 3 or 4 way contests that Labour might think they can hold on to. So going to be very interesting.
And also, the interesting factor here is there's still a large number of undecideds. And I've read a few different theories about these undecideds. It could be people not willing to admit that they're going to vote for Labour, or it could be Labour people who are thinking about voting SNP for the first time but can't bring themselves to admit that they're actually going to vote SNP. Nobody's quite sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that could cut both ways. Certainly, the poll and evidence I've seen kind of suggests that of the people that are saying they're voting SNP, they are more likely to vote and to stick with SNP. So even the SNP's half of the vote is firmer than Labour's quarter of the vote. But as you say, there's a number of people who haven't either made up their mind or aren't saying yet, and they could go either way. I mean, one of the things we know about elections is if somebody's got momentum and looks like a winner, people like to vote for a winner. So it could go the SNP's way in actual fact if that holds up.
All right, so to move on to someone who's possibly not a winner, and it pains me to move on to him, but I suppose that we've not actually brought up Nick Clegg during this. So it seems that everything that comes out of his mouth is either an apology or some kind of veiled threat. There was 2 things I noted from Nick Clegg. So we'll start with the first one. He's saying that you've all got to vote Lib Dem to ensure that there'll be a solid coalition. Now, this sort of rules out a party who's going to have many more seats than his is at the end of this election.
Yeah, aye. He's got a hard job, hasn't he? I mean, he's got himself in this terrible mess with the stupid things they've done over the last 5 years. They're going to lose probably half their seats, maybe a lot more. And he's having to fight a rearguard action. So he's forced to say all kinds of things that don't really stack up in order to try and hold on to what they can. Very difficult job for him, but frankly, I don't really feel sorry for him. His own seat as well, as some of the polling is showing that his own seat in Sheffield could be under threat.
One of the things that makes it difficult to feel sorry for him is that when he makes a speech, he very, very often he tends to put Salmond and Farage in the same bracket, as if they're the same kind of political ideology.
It does, and it's I don't think we can really forgive him for that. It's he must know better, but he does it to try and make a point. Not very well made, and not very good.
And let's move on to the last one for today. So now, as a seasoned campaigner from the independence referendum, I remember us being beaten over the head constantly with IFS reports. That's the Institute for Fiscal Studies. And the Labour Party weren't any slower than the Conservatives to use these to their advantage in the independence referendum. But now that an Institute for Fiscal Studies report has come out that doesn't agree with Labour, it seems they are not to be trusted. What did you make of this?
Well, it's not something new, and it's happened before. I remember that in previous elections, Labour campaigners, I remember Peter Mandelson at one point making some comments about the IFS being unable to predict what was going to happen 5 years out, and then during the referendum they were trying to predict what was going to happen 50 years out and using that to beat us over the head with. So it's all politics. The IFS basically crunch the numbers that are in front of them, but they don't take recognition of the impact that policy changes, especially over the medium and long term, can have on growth rates in the economy, etc. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that they're saying what they are. They're known as a right-wing think tank, and they're having a go at Labour and Miliband kicking back on them. Not really a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, it does tend to put their neutrality into question, the fact that any report they suggest seem to favour more neoliberalism.
That's right, because I say they don't take account of the growth impact that different policies can have on the economy. There was actually an interesting piece of work that somebody sent me from Morgan Stanley, of all people, and they'd done a whole bunch of economic analysis, and they came to the conclusion that over the last 5 years or so since the crash, the economies that had shrunk the most were the ones that introduced the most austerity. And austerity, they said, was basically counterproductive, because the more you cut, the more you shrink their economy, and the worse things get, which is kind of the message we've been preaching now in the anti-austerity agenda. And it's nice to see some of the Morgan Stanley coming out and making that point in black and white. They had a lovely graph that showed the countries that had cut the least had actually benefited from stronger growing economies.
If you send me the photo of that, I'll stick it on the blog post. So, this is our last wee moment before the election. We'll be back with a wee show after the election, and maybe one or two to see how things are developing. But what's your general overview as we're about to finish up?
Yeah, and I think we talked about Scotland at the start of the podcast there today. If you look at the UK, the picture is very interesting. It's a multi-dimensional game of chess going on, because there's so many different things moving in different directions. But it's interesting looking at it today. All the people that are making forecasts as to what's going to happen, they're all kind of converging on the same place now, which tends to be what happens in the last day or so. And basically what they're all saying is that in terms of votes, the Tories will be slightly ahead. In terms of seats, it's looking very much neck and neck. Maybe the Tories very slightly ahead on seats. And in that scenario, we're in a place where Cameron can't become Prime Minister. He won't have enough seats in the Commons to do it. And I think we're very much looking like Ed Miliband's nightmare, where he's got to make a choice. Does he want to be Prime Minister? If it means doing a deal with the SNP, or at least talking to the SNP, or is he going to walk away from it? And I think we all know what the answer is going to be. But that's certainly the way it's looking now. If I had to stick my neck out, I think we're looking at Tories in the high 270s, Labour in the low 270s, and the Lib Dem somewhere in the mid-20s. That kind of looks like where it's heading. But as I say, could be big surprises tomorrow. You never know what's going to happen on the day.
Yep, and we'll be back with an episode after to see how it's all working out. It could be that there's still a lot to be worked out when we come back as well. So.
Oh, indeed. Could go on for weeks.
Well.
Great stuff. Thanks, Michael. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
If you were caught up in the madness in St Enoch Square on Monday, I hope you've been able to arrange counselling. I hear it was the biggest rammy since the abdication. Boots, fists and elbows flying in all directions in a rolling tide of rage and sweary words, police with riot shields defending themselves against a volley of eggs and iron brew cans, Jim Murphy holed up in a subway phoning Ian Gray for advice, Eddie Izzard fleeing the scene on a hastily commandeered unicycle. It was absolute chaos, tweeted the BBC's James Cook, mysteriously failing to add, almost as bad as the leaders' debate I chaired. Right, my brain's about to self-combust, so that's enough drivel. Time to look at Izzardgate without hyperventilating. I was at home enjoying a glass of warm milk, so I'm open to being corrected, but the rammy, such as it was, centred around 4 protesters, well-known bamsticks who are notorious for disrupting political events. 2 of them were SNP members, who frankly should have had a size 10 imprint on their backsides eons ago, but better late than never. And, by the way, how is that Ian Smart inquiry motoring along, Kezia? It wasn't edifying TV, and I could see why your Auntie Senga covered the budgie's cage with a sheet. Shoving a placard in people's faces and megaphoning them from point-blank range is the act of a Ned. And whilst a witty heckle is a joy forever, freedom of speech can't include the freedom to shout someone else down, even if it's Jim Murphy. Yes, I know Jim's got a turbocharged gob of his own, and once went at Pete Wishart so fiercely he almost ate him, but we have to be better than that. However, that's all there is to it. It wasn't tea and cucumber sandwiches, but it wasn't a riot. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't violence apart from some pantomime shoving. It wasn't even unusual in the history of electioneering, which has always had untidy exchanges going on at the fringes. Winston Churchill, campaigning in Dundee in 1909, didn't reach the end of the beginning of his speech before being taken down by suffragettes. John Major, in his days as a grey spitting image caricature and not the sexy beast he later became, regularly had Labour activists trying to harangue him off his soapbox. And there's now a commemorative plaque, yes there really is, on the spot where, 3 elections ago, Slugger Prescott's ferocious reaction to being hit with an egg made Floyd Mayweather look like Tinky Winky. So, BBC, Labour Propaganda Unit, those are 2 separate entities I hasten to add, and gentlemen of the press, let's can the hyperbole and get on with this election. After which, who knows? Perhaps it really will be chaos.